Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another Sunday. Thank you for being here. Since the last time, we've got a new camera. You can see it's a bit wider, higher resolution to match the work that Shay has been doing, and Austin to upgrade the level of density of the video image and align that and make it work. So thank you to you guys for the work you do behind the scenes to make all this kind of sort of happen. Today we're talking about one of the big cosmic forces in the universe that makes it all work, from the grandest scales you can imagine down to the tiniest scales that we've ever measured. That's the force of entropy. Entropy. Yeah, so most of us have sort of an idea of what entropy means. The fact that we have things that it's the force of the universe that breaks things down into their component parts. From one standpoint, it's the process of dying. Everything is born and everything dies, and everything goes through a process in between where the forces of life and the forces of death, or the forces of assembly and the forces of dissolution, balance each other out in a sort of grand, once again, yin-yang symbol, where this perfect balance of forces holds the whole thing together on an infinite number of levels at once, the largest you can ever imagine to the smallest you could ever think of. This concept that you have like the concept behind the Big Bang. Even if you believe in the Big Bang or not believe in the Big Bang, if there was such a thing as a Big Bang, then we have infinite solidity object in an infinite state of non-entropy that then explodes, and all these particles that are coming out are dispersing, becoming more chaotic. I guess the ultimate form of entropy would be complete chaos. And so essentially that's what the scientists now still agree, that there was a Big Bang and that the universe is expanding and cooling, and eventually it'll reach a unified state of unified chaos, complete entropy, where everything is spread out evenly. It's sort of what happens when you've got, a gas in a room, and you open the door, and the molecules begin to come out and mix with the other molecules, and pretty soon it disperses more and more evenly until both rooms are equally dispersed with the two chemicals. But ultimately, the biggest idea of all is that the universe itself is filled with this constant process of building and dispersing, of creating and destroying. And the force of entropy is the force that's constantly trying to break things apart into their component pieces. And the grand force of life is some kind of invisible force in the universe that is attempting to constantly assemble things together. The life force of the universe, which appears to have some form of conscious agenda, conscious goal of assembling component parts together and forming things and making things. So those two big forces, where the force of life is trying to pull things together and take component parts and build them together and make ever more complex structures, that fight against the forces of entropy to constantly tear them back apart again into their component parts. And as these two balance and struggle together, you see that in the force of organic life, like your own life, your own body. You know, when you're born as a baby, the life forces are extremely high and extremely active. It's an explosion of life forces that are assembling and taking component parts and putting them together and growing your body out of two cells and burning pathways in your neurological system, and cell division is making you grow larger and mature from a baby into a young person, and then puberty, and then there's at some place around 25 years old or so, the force levels out and stops. The growth phase has now reached its completion, and the system is now coasting on momentum. But the actual force of assembling and making new has ended, and the forces of entropy begin to gain an upper hand. And in your 30s and in your 40s, it becomes harder and harder and harder for your system to tread water and stay in the same place, because the stream of water that you're trying to tread is inevitably pushing you downstream, and you're having to work harder and harder the more you age to stay in the same place. Eventually, you can't. The forces of dissolution take over more and more and more against the forces of building, and that's what we call aging. Sooner or later, everyone looks in the mirror and sees an old person that blows their mind. That's my experience. That's when you realize that only the body ages, and that who's inside you is the same person you've always been. You've always been the same person, even the person you were inside the womb, who you were when you first woke up from the void and realized, where am I? Who am I? And you did that without words, because you didn't have language yet. It was a free-form state of consciousness that eventually began to solidify. At 16 to 24 weeks, all five senses come online in the womb. But like I said before, way back a few years ago in these broadcasts, I'm floating in body temperature amniotic fluid, like a float tank, body temperature float tank and fluid. And even though all five senses have come online, I'm in the dark, so my eyes aren't collecting information, and my nose and my mouth are filled with fluids, so I'm not tasting, I'm not smelling. But sound travels through water 5 times better than air. So actually, our total experience for the first 9 months of our life, all of us, is a sound and vibrational experience of sound waves amplifying through the water. We're baptized by sound and vibration, which is why I think that sound and vibration is the number one most powerful technique for digging into the deepest part of my subconscious experience, because that's the very first experience I ever had, when my subconscious mind was first being grown and formed. So the power of sound and the power of vibration to tap into the deepest part of my experience is paramount. And it stood the test of time in cultures all over the planet since the beginning. Every culture on Earth has a sound and vibration component that it always has been steeped in spiritual venues. It hasn't been for entertainment. It's been the realm of spirit. It's been the realm of the shamans and the holy people to deliver. During festivals, there would be sound and music to push the celebration of a cosmic event, a spring equinox, or autumn equinox, or the grand procession of the planets. And it was always something that was cosmic about the use of music and sound to accentuate and push it to its edge, to make the meaning of whatever that celebration was going to be deepen and be as deep as it could possibly be, so you could really grok what we're celebrating as a cosmic event. And music was the way of doing that, because it had a way of digging into the deepest part of your experience and allowing that to open up and have that sort of experience, that cosmic experience. But stars are born and stars die, and universes are born and universes die, and people are born and people die. Inanimate objects are born and die, rocks and planets, and all of it is under the force of this inexorable force that is constantly eating away to break things into their component parts, against an equally powerful force that is working against that to pull those component parts together and build them up and to make things out of it, make things that are living. When we look out into the heavens and we see the trillions of stars, and this is just the teeniest, tiniest little percentage of our own galaxy that we're seeing here. We're not even getting out into the universe at large yet. And we start to contemplate that each one of these dots is some kind of a star system. In some cases, it's a whole planetary system or a nebula. Billions, trillions of stars in one area. And you take one of those stars, and stars, we have the same lifetime. They mature and they age, and the nuclear furnace at the inside of the star is weakening, and pretty soon the star collapses on itself and explodes. The amazing thing is that every atom in your body was once inside of a star explosion. You explode this star, and all these component parts, this is the Crab Nebula. This is an exploded star. This is what a star looks like after it's exploded. And all of this matter, all of these gas fields are filled with all of the elements of the periodic table. That's where they come from. Exploding stars, in the level of intensity of that explosion, fuses the first atoms in the universe, are formed from this explosion. All of the atoms that we know in the periodic table now have been born out of chaos, out of the grand entropy event of taking a star and exploding it out through the force of entropy into all of its component parts. And here they are. And then the force of life is working on these component parts, and it pulls these component parts together into, atoms, all the atoms of the periodic table, where we're taking chaos, entropy, and solidifying it now into form. The force of life is taking this and assembling it into compounds. compounds that make everything you know. You and me, all the plants, the planets, anything that's alive, inanimate and inanimate objects, rocks and planets and asteroids. Those are formed of compounds made from the atoms that came from exploding stars, including more and more assembly in more and more complex ways. Life continues. It continues to assemble into more fantastical, mind-blowingly complex forms. And then those forms can now hold information, blueprints to build ever more complex forms like you and me, born out of stardust, on an epic journey of time and space to find out the true nature of our souls, which I guess is the heart of a star. But in the human realm, in a practical sense in your daily life, it's the effort you have to make in order to do things against the force of entropy that works against that. In this case, we call that laziness. We don't want to get out of bed. We don't want to sweep the floor. We don't want to do the dishes. We don't want to clean up after ourselves. That's the conscious force of will of life that constantly works against the forces of dissolution and chaos and entropy in your life. That there's a certain ordered environment that, like what you see around me here. So this is all, everything is in its place. It looks sort of chaotic, but actually everything is in its place. I tend to end up with piles of papers all around me. My keyboards behind me tend to end up with piles of papers and books and stuff. And periodically I can't stand it anymore. The force of life inside of me can't take it anymore. And so I start to figure out, how am I going to deal with all these piles of stuff? Where is it going to go? I'm going to have to use my brain energy to figure it out. I'm going to have to use my physical body to go over and pick things up and take them and figure out where they're going to go and stuff them there. That's going to take me time that I don't want to do. So I avoid it, and I avoid it, and I avoid it. And the chaos gets bigger, and the force of entropy is working 24 hours a day to assemble more chaos in my room until the force of life takes over. Now, everybody's got their own threshold for how much chaos you're comfortable with having around you. So some people have a high tolerance for the chaos before they're goaded into action to overcome their inertia and their laziness in order to do something about it. Other people have a very low threshold for that. They're constantly running around and dusting things, and nothing is out of place. As soon as there's a stray something somewhere, they're over the top attentive and fixing that up. And woe to the couple who have those two opposite pairs living in the same house together. Sometimes it becomes a wonderful complementary experience, but in my own life as a solo human being, me and my relation with my world is a relationship of me versus my laziness and my will to action to do something, to do the work necessary to assemble and make things orderly. That is the force of life. That's the cosmic force of life in something ordinary like laziness. In the great spiritual, esoteric traditions from the East, there are numerous esoteric schools and secret organizations who hold the esoteric secrets, and the traditions there, those secrets always had to do with the esoteric and the mesoteric and the exoteric. So it's like a bullseye. The exoteric was the regular man on the street, the layman level of information and knowledge. From the religious standpoint, it would be going to church on Sunday, right? Or going to the synagogue, or going to the Catholic Church. Catholic Church is a good example. You go to the Catholic Church on Sunday because you've been taught in Sunday school as a child that if you don't go to church on Sunday, then you'll be damned forever to hell. So every Sunday you go to church. And I'm sure the population of people in church are spread into every percentage you can think of, from the non-believer who is trying to cover their bets. I mean, I don't believe in all this stuff, but just in case, I'm going to cover my ass and put some money in the plate every week in case I'm wrong. To the true believer on the other end, who believes all the stuff that they're taught in Sunday school. But meantime, the people in the church are watching a sermon that's done in Latin, and nobody speaks Latin. And periodically a bell will sound, and you get on your knees and pray, and then a bell will sound, and you stand up again. And in the Presbyterian and the Protestant and the Methodist traditions, the tradition that I was brought up in, you stand up and you sing from a hymnal, and then you sit back down, and somebody does a sermon, and then you stand up and sing, and you sit back down. It's all sort of very mechanical. You're doing your duty in order to buy your place in heaven, I guess. So that's the exoteric form. The mesoteric form would be the priesthood. Back to the Catholic Church would be the priesthood. Now the priest's going to college and seminary school and learning in great depths, levels of the Bible and the holy teachings and the more secret documents that nobody gets to see from level 1 of the secret library at the Vatican are way more information and knowledge about what's going on than the average person on the street. The esoteric tradition would be the Pope and the cardinals around them, who have access to the secret archives and the ancient books and the 14 books of the Bible that were excised during the ecumenical councils, the book of Judas and the book of Mary Magdalene, and 14 books that were pulled out because they sort of didn't toe the line of what the church was trying to preach. But in the true esoteric traditions, from the esoteric schools from the East, you always had the same thing. You had the exoteric circle for the masses to guide people's souls to, at least, if nothing else, be kind and loving and empathic to other people. The great 10 rules that extends pretty much in all religions you can think of. You don't kill people. You love others as you love your own, as you love yourself. You do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And on like that. You don't steal. You don't do bad things. You do good things. You live a good life. You foster balance and peace and harmony and love in the world. That's what we're here to do. Just imagine what would it be like if everyone on earth lived by those principles. Loving others as you love yourself and your own family. Doing unto others as you would have them do unto you. Peace and harmony. There are no strangers, kind of an idea. So that was kind of what the exoteric was in the grand traditions from the East, the true esoteric schools. And the mesoteric was, once again, the monks and the sort of priesthood that got the next level of information. And the esoteric circle was the Grand Master, who was not nominated or voted into that position, but was acknowledged by all present as being the enlightened one, the one who obviously was head and shoulders above everyone else in their wisdom and understanding. They stepped into that position by natural right of consciousness. And the esoteric secrets in that realm were the secrets of the inner secrets of yoga and of meditation and of conscious labor and intentional suffering. And what I mean by that is in the spirit realm, we have the same thing. We have the forces of entropy continually working on our consciousness itself to dumb us down and make us believe that we are ordinary people with ordinary names and ordinary jobs, and that there's nothing magical in the universe at all. That is just what you see on the news and what you've sort of been taught as you grew up, that you drop away the naive things of childhood at a certain point, and you grow up and get a job. And from that point on, you leave the magical realms of childhood behind. And you become solidified and deadened and contracted and crystallized in your belief forms. You don't have a free-flowing exploration of life and the universe and the wonders like you do as a child. That's all been contracted down into behavioral forms that are repetitive and not fanciful. You lose the ability to play. Artists are those people who refuse to allow that process to happen. Artists are the ones who maintain the childhood wonder even as they grow into adulthood, and the force of their consciousness resists that force of crystallization, of the hypnosis that society wants to bring me to, so that I become a good worker in a cubicle, working 40 hours a week or 60 hours a week for the same pay with no overpay. It's the formation of being a good worker in a system that requires good workers to be there to make the system work. So because of that, you'll see that in general, art and music and dance and fashion design and all the other kind of art forms are snubbed in society in general. And if money has to be cut from school programs, those are the ones who get cut first. In society, and particularly where music is at right now, where musicians are at, it's pretty much now impossible to make a living as a musician. So the field of being a musician has pretty much been destroyed. Speaking as a composer and a musician, since we don't have product to sell anymore, used to be vinyl records. You would compose in music, or you'd have a band, and you'd have a fan base, and you cut a record, and everybody runs and buys the record, and you get money from that. Now, the record companies have always been shyster companies who screwed the musicians. So you might get 10% of, and they get 90. And even the ones who are making millions of dollars off a gold record, it means that the record company is making hundreds of millions of dollars. And then that went the wayside and went into CDs, or went into audio cassette tapes, and then that went into CDs. I went through that whole process. My first albums in 1986 were on cassette tape because CDs hadn't been invented yet. They weren't out yet. They weren't a thing. Later, as it became more and more of a thing, and cassette tapes started to go to the wayside, I had to make the shift, and everything had to go into CD. But that's the process of entropy. Entropy moving, and all of a sudden what used to be reel-to-reel tape became cassette tape, and then that sort of disseminated away, and CDs were the thing, and then CDs went away, and then it became downloads. So now there was no physical product anymore. There's just the music. And for the musicians who had contracts like me, where the contract with the record company was going to be, I would compose and make the music. They would take that music and burn it onto CDs and make covers for those CDs that would slip inside, and they would sell that product, manufacture that product, sell that product, advertise that product. But all of a sudden, when there was no more product, now they're selling just my sounds. And that was never part of the deal. All of a sudden, there's no product, and they're selling, and I'm getting 10% of my sounds, my music. And then it went to streaming services, where you can get access to thousands of albums from all kinds of musicians, and it only costs you $10 a month. What are those musicians making? How are they making any money? They're not making no money. You know, the most I ever made in 1 year was $85,000 in royalties. The company that was selling them were making millions, and I was the #1 star in their stable. Their whole business was based on my sales, my unique approach to sound and healing sounds and music with brain entrainment, 3D. I was the star of the show for them. But once streaming services happened, I'm making $2,000 a year. So that's devastated. And I look out on other artists, and I know that they just go under. They have to get a job somewhere. For me, I had an active practice. I was making soundtracks for patients. I had unique soundtracks. I had my own website. I already had an international presence who would come to me to buy my product. Yes, they would see my product on Spotify, but they didn't go to Spotify to buy my product. They'd see it there. But I still had significant sales that could keep me alive. I was selling more on my own website than, 20, 30 times more income from the sales of my own website than I was making in royalties from these guys, I was still part of some kind of shyster agreement that didn't work anymore for me, which I finally had to legally extract myself from, which took years and years and a lot of money. But finally I did. I'm in control of all my soundtracks again. But that was the battle of my life for the legacy of all my compositions and all of my composed work and my babies, my music that came through me. Somebody was trying to own that. And I was getting a little bit from my own work. That's the reason why I'm such a supporter of Taylor Swift and what she's accomplished. Where exactly the same thing, she was making diddle, and she broke out of that and had to fight like hell in order to get her music back. And the only way that she could do that, because they still owned her original soundtracks that she made, she went and recorded them all again, and now they belong to her. And all her fan base moved over and rebought her new albums that she re-recorded and thumbed her nose at the recording studio company who was screwing her. And now she's made $4 billion in sales and concert tours that would have gone to them. And she would have maybe made $1 million or $2 million. Now she's got $4 billion. So the empowerment of that, I tip my hat. I know what she had to go through because I had to go through something similar in a more micro realm, but I'm no slouch. I'm an international figure. I'm a public figure. So I have a presence in the world. People know who I am. So I have the ability to survive. But if I was just a regular guy who wanted to be a musician as my living, there's no way I could do that. The only way I could do that is to do, live music on a stage, but that doesn't pay anything, So it's a troubling period of time for musicians. But once again, music has grown. Music has reached a plateau place. Music has started to contract and die. The forces of entropy have taken over. That will also be followed by a new growth. There will be a new period. And I believe that what I had to do and what I see Taylor Swift doing in a million times bigger way on the world stage is part of that process of pushing back against the forces of entropy that want to dissolve you and creating a new format for musicians worldwide to look what she did and say, maybe I can do something like that. Maybe I can sell my own music. Maybe I can be my own artist. Maybe people eventually get tired of corporate music as opposed to the real composers and people. Like there's no room for a Bob Dylan or a Beatles or Rolling Stones or anybody like that anymore. So when we go back to the cosmic journey of the song that we are here to sing, so to speak, and we see that this force of the star exploding and forming, all of the atoms that we see in the periodic table that form themselves into compounds and make people, and all the diversity throughout the whole universe of what we see. And the question we have is, just how prevalent is this level of diversity of life? How prevalent is that in the universe? How come we haven't heard, anybody calling us back in the SETI program? We've been looking for 70 years. We haven't seen anybody, and nobody's contacted us back. And there's a whole bunch of different reasons why that might be the case. Not the least of which is that in the grand scale of the universe, we're such an infinitely small little section that we can broadcast to. They might not be in that section. May be everywhere else. We may be in some backwater area of the galaxy that is like nobody ever goes there. They're too far away. Maybe they'll receive our signals in a few million years. But I like the statement from Carl Sagan, which he wrote in his book Contact. And if you haven't seen that movie, you need to go see it. The universe is a mighty big place. And if we're the only ones who showed up as living entities, then it's an awful waste of space if we're the only ones here. So it's almost assured just by the numbers, the math, the statistics, that the universe is filled with life throughout, with huge empty expanses between. And it could be that, here we go, new scientist. Is life the result of the laws of entropy? Now, there's an interesting question, because, is life the result of the laws of entropy? That's counterintuitive, because I'm just describing the fact that you're taking chaos and assembling it together. Life is assembling it together. So what does this mean? For nearly 80 years, Edwin Schrödinger, and if you remember, Edwin Schrödinger is the guy with the cat in the box, the living dead cat in the box, Schrödinger's cat paradox. I won't get into that now, but I did a whole live stream on that, and I mentioned it many times in many live streams in the past. Schrödinger used physics of the day to try to understand the origins of life. Now Stephen Alexander and Salvador Moreno try to do the same thing in modern science. And what are they doing? A new physics of the theory of life has proposed the provocative idea that life exists because the law of increasing entropy drives matter to acquire lifelike physical properties. The assembling of component parts that are put there by entropy, the force of the universe that wants to assemble things together, that we call the force of life, trying to assemble things together into systems, into organic systems, into planetary systems, into nebula, into galaxies, solar systems. That force that's assembling might be a foundational aspect of how the universe attempts to increase entropy. And how that works is that the more you assemble complex systems together, the more those systems themselves use the power of entropy to break things down as they use them in metabolic processes. And what comes out the other end is chaos again, refined chaos. So when we think of chaos in the universe, if the universe is trying to constantly increase the entropy, then that means we're trying to pull things into the component parts. And if we create a living system like this, and we sunlight hits our skin and causes reactions, and we eat food and it goes through a series of processes that break it all down into ATP, and we use that ATP as energy to move ourselves around and do things until we have expended it all, and we have broken all those chemical compounds down into their component parts and excreted it out in the toilet. We have just refined the entropy process, and by making more entropy. And more entropy in this, from this standpoint, doesn't mean more volume of entropy. It means more entropy processes at finer and finer and microscopic levels, and essentially atomic levels and subatomic levels and quantum levels of entropy. The more systems get complex and the more complexity can come out of those systems, the more complex the process of breaking things down into their component parts and increasing the total entropy in the universe. So what this theory and other ones like it are actually saying is that the formation of life, the force of life that takes the component parts that entropy creates and assembles them together into more complex structures like you and me and living things is a foundational law of the universe. That according to that idea, the universe has to be filled with life everywhere, because it's a foundational factor that the universe is attempting to do, to create these systems throughout the whole universe that can assemble together in more and more and more complex systems to make the process of breaking things down into their component parts more and more and more refined and pervasive. So life is part of the rule, according to something like this. It's not, gee, I wonder if there's any life out there. According to this, it has to be there for the universe to function properly. It's part of the system. It's part of what's so. Why does life exist? Popular hypothesis: credit a primordial soup, a bolt of lightning, and a colossal stroke of luck. But if a provocative new theory is correct, luck may have little to do with it. Instead, according to the physicists proposing the idea, the origin and subsequent evolution of life follow from the fundamental laws of nature and should be as unsurprising as rocks rolling downhill. That it's the rule, not just an accident, not just a maybe. That it's the foundational rule of how the universe operates is to create a system that can pull the chaos of entropy together, build more complex systems to process that entropy into an interim stage of highly organized systems that then use that to build together into something solid and then break it down in more refined ways that increases the overall entropy in the universe. We are a way of refining higher levels of entropy by our physical processes. How does life perform this amazing feat? Schrödinger describes how all living entities turn entropy into order. They ingest it in the form of energy and matter, break it apart, and reorganize it into forms that are beneficial for their continued existence. It's a process that goes by a common name, metabolism. So this concept that your metabolic processes are taking compounds and breaking them back apart into atoms and extracting energy from that process in a series of biochemical reactions has ended up at the other side in the toilet with millions of times more entropy than would have been there if you hadn't been there doing that process. There's as many atoms in a single molecule of your DNA as there are stars in the typical galaxy. We are, each of us, a little universe. And inside that universe of your DNA are millions and billions of processes going on that assemble and disassemble into chaos in the process of metabolizing the universe and creating a life that then excretes more entropy out the other end. Pretty mind-boggling sort of idea. It's like, really? Wow. And in that DNA, we now know that the DNA, like everything else in your body, is intimately entangled at a quantum level with every other thing in your body, including your consciousness itself. That means if you can reach the right place in your consciousness, a place before a thought where you're closer to the present moment, synchronized with it, your ideas now have the possibility of reprogramming your own DNA at a quantum level that exhibits itself in a molecular level. And the sort of proof of that concept is the idea of the placebo effect and spontaneous remissions from cancer and impossible things that should not be able to exist in a classic Newtonian rules universe, but can only exist in a quantum universe where everything is deeply connected together in ways that don't appear to be so in this sort of universe that we're used to. The process of reprogramming our own bodies and our own DNA by reaching a certain state of consciousness where we now can take control is one of the core ideas of the deep study of the esoteric sciences of these secret organizations from the East that have been perpetuated for thousands of years. It is the esoteric circle who understands these principles and what kind of breathing and yoga and chakra activation, how you do that in the proper and true and real way, and not in the popular way that you might pick up in a book. Or go to some class to learn some breathing exercises, some pranayama exercise to activate your chakras. This is esoteric information disseminated to the exoteric layman on the street who can't possibly understand how to use it properly, which means you do nothing but create chaos and problems. The true understanding of pranayama and the true understanding of the chakras and how they're networked into my physical body is far beyond our ability to completely understand it or use it properly. Without years of esoteric training at another level that we're not, most of us, prepared to do. For instance, each chakra is associated with a gland. The glands in the body are special. They function differently than anything else in the body. They're not organs, they're glands, and they're endocrine glands. And endocrine glands are specialized in producing very powerful chemicals called hormones that have a super powerful effect that's instantaneous on the body's function. Adrenaline. As soon as it hits your blood, wham, you're on it. You're on top of the table, your heart is racing, your respiration is up, you've been pumped up with energy. That's an instantaneous effect. It's why the glands are called the ductless glands. No duct, no tube coming down. And the gland is over here with a little tube going into your blood. Nope, and that's not how it works. That would take too long. So the gland is infused with blood vessels so that it's hard to tell where the gland cells are and the blood vessels are because they're so intertwined and networked together. So as soon as that gland excretes the hormone, it's instantaneously in the blood and we have instant effect. Why? Because that's how we survive, by being snappy and being more snappy than you. If I'm more snappy than you, then you're breakfast. And there are meridians associated with each chakra, chi circulation associated with each chakra, specific points on the body that are involved with the chakras. There's respiratory cycles associated with each chakra, and the respiratory cycles involve specific muscle groups in your body that are used to activate each chakra. And so the different muscle groups for each of these chakras that go up are closely associated with the respiration phase that's going on there at the same time. And you don't have to learn it. You don't control that process from here. You initiate the process in a certain state of consciousness. And the program that runs that process is automated in the autonomic nervous system. It's an automated process that takes place by itself. It's not something you have to learn as breathing exercises. The yoga asanas are specific sets of exercises for those core muscle groups that are associated with each chakra, and that's what that's for. It's not an exercise program to make you look good and look physically handsome in a bathing suit. It's a very precise muscular exercise program with yoga for only those muscle groups that are associated with controlling each chakra, so that when you reach the right state of meditation and consciousness, a process begins all of its own that you are witness to, of certain muscle groups automatically contracting around that chakra as you step up through these different stages. It's an automated process that this part is not supposed to be directing. But ultimately, in all of this discussion we're having here, we and the universe are one thing. And the forces within the universe that govern the formation of galaxies and nebula and planets and solar systems and organic biospheres and the universe of your body down to a quantum level, all of it is one grand thing. It's not me versus them. It's all of us together in a network of one single consciousness and one single body. We're deeply connected to this controlling sort of impetus that arises out of a continuum to self-organize and to break down at the same time, and to work those two forces together to explore ever finer degrees of ways of creating more and more entropy in the universe, balanced with assembly. And ultimately, consciousness itself is the finest example of how we do that process. Consciousness itself, grokking what I see, bringing that in, thinking about it, having opinions about it, talking about it, having ideas about it, writing books about it, making movies about it. All of those are forms of creating extra entropy at a much finer degree than we can do with metabolic processes through metabolism in my body. Consciousness is 1,000 times more efficient in pulling energy, coalescing it into an idea, and then refining that idea and sloughing off things that no longer work. That's why it's good to find out you're wrong and change your ideas. You maximize entropy because those ideas now disseminate into the component parts. The finest degree is above thinking. The finest degree, the biggest bang out of the buck, is me waking up at the biggest sense that I can think of. Waking up to the true nature of my own consciousness itself, that it is intimately associated with the universe at large, that the deeper I can grok that, the more the false ideas about what I've thought this was all about evaporate and fall away and create more entropy coming out of the false ideas that get sloughed off as I reach deeper and deeper stages of awakening about the true nature of what this is all about. So that means that the universe has heavily invested in the formation of life systems that assemble into organic systems that form brains, and that brains that have the possibility of self-sentience and the possibility of awakening to the true nature of the whole. That is the maximum possible way the universe gets the bang out of the buck of increasing entropy in the universe and pushing the force of assembly to match it. It's a never-ending process because there's no place that you can ever get to where you could truly grok the whole. It's an infinite journey of ever-expanding levels of enlightenment that force extra entropy to process through, that forces the force of life to need to assemble that together into ever finer and more refined forms. Goes forever. There's no such thing as a destination of enlightenment. Enlightenment is a verb. It's not a noun. So now all of our consciousnesses together is another new way that we can align ourselves together to increase entropy and increase evolution of consciousness. As we come together, everyone is part of a connected cosmic system, part earth and sea, wind and fire, with some salt and dust swimming in them. We have a universe within ourselves that mimics the universe outside. We, coming together, can now magnify this consciousness and this exploration and the dissemination of entropy. And the way we refine that is what these live streams are truly all about. It's up to us. If the world is descending into chaos and entropy, it's us who are born at this time to deal with that. There's no accidents. The level of consciousness that we as a group have in order to understand why you would want to come and listen to something like some crazy guy like me talking about stuff like this and giving a practical scientific ability to refine the process of bringing our minds together with brain entrainment to align our consciousness to a finer degree to shift the quantum field is something that makes the universe happy, because we generate extra entropy that gives us an impetus to build more, to refine that more. It's us who have been saddled with the job of changing the world. And the world is in a pretty tough place right now. You can see it's descending into an entropy level of chaos around the world. People are dying. There's wars happening. We have fascist elements that are rising in the world that want to take over. We have to fight that. We have to stand up against that. We have the possibility of doing it. So we reach this place together that is the null space, the ultimate entropy generating conscious space that creates a vacuum that sucks consciousness and sucks the living forces into that vacuum space with a desire to build more complexity, more incredible, mind-blowing ideas and experiences of what it's all about. And that's where we're going today. So here we have our headphones. And take a breath and relax. And here we go. Thank you. A couple of years ago, I did one live stream called The Talisman of Power. That's always a good one to see because it's got to do with transformation of energy in another yin yang. On the one side is a coin. So there's a coin. On one side is Caesar, and the other side is a talisman of power. Money itself is energy. It's belief that something has worth. And how you transform energy in the talisman of power realm helps to dictate what happens in the coin realm and this world. The two are intimately tied together. So as long as we're talking about transformation of power and money, I just wanted to let everybody know that this is Cyber Weekend with big discounts on everything on my website, scientificsounds.com. 20% off on all soundtracks that I've got, and 10% off of all of the sound chairs and the sound tables that we make, and an extra 5% off of the sound chairs and sound tables on top of that for anyone listening to this broadcast. Anyone who is part of this network that we're part of, an extra 5% on top of 10% if you wanted to ever buy a sound chair or a sound table. Lasts through midnight Monday. That being said, thank you all for being here. Love and blessings and health to everyone until I see you next Sunday. Thanks a lot.